I went to my mom after a few days of this not subsiding, and I said, "Mom, I think my brain is swelling, and I want you to believe me." Shortly thereafter, I was hospitalized with hydrocephalus due to an arachnoid brain cyst.
Tyler Henry walked into a courthouse the morning before brain surgery because he was not sure he was walking back out. This is Tyler Henry, the Hollywood medium who built a career telling other people what was coming. But when it came to his own life, he never saw what was coming. So what happened? And why has so much changed since then? Join us as we uncover what has been happening with Tyler Henry lately. The man everyone trusted with their dead. On May 7th, 2025, Tyler Henry and his partner of nearly 9 years, Clint Godwin, walked into the Beverly Hills courthouse to get married. There were no guests and no celebration waiting afterward. The next morning, Tyler was scheduled for brain surgery, and neither of them knew what the operation would bring. If it went wrong, if Tyler never woke up the same, they wanted to be married before facing whatever came next. Clint had first come to Tyler in 2016, a few months after his grandfather took his own life. He booked a reading the way skeptics often do, expecting nothing. Tyler looked at him and immediately began describing his grandfather in terms Clint had never shared publicly. The reading lasted an hour. The relationship lasted 9 years. And the number 222, which Clint's grandfather had apparently sent through in that first session as his identifying sign, had appeared at every significant moment since. They signed the papers. Then Clint glanced up at the courthouse clock. It read 2:22. That afternoon, they shared the news on Instagram. Tyler's message was simple and heartfelt. He wrote that he'd known from the moment they met that Clint was the one, calling their marriage the best premonition he'd ever had. Within minutes, the comments filled with people who had been watching Tyler for years, fans, friends, celebrities, none of them knowing what the morning had actually looked like. Few of them knew that just hours earlier, Tyler had stood in a courthouse saying, "I do," because he wasn't sure he'd make it through the week. The next morning, the moment they had been trying not to think about finally arrived. Doctors removed most of the colloid tumor, a slow-growing mass near the center of his brain, a cyst he had been born with, which had already required emergency surgery when he was 18 and had never fully resolved. Left untreated, it could cause sudden loss of consciousness, coma, or death. It was not a small thing. Not long afterward, he shared a photo from his hospital bed, thanking the medical team and reassuring fans that the operation had been a success. He even said he'd be back to doing readings soon. Tyler had built that waiting list across a decade of television. By the time the cyst forced his hand in 2025, Tyler had built one of the most unusual careers in American television. 4 seasons on E!, 2 Netflix series, sold-out arena tours, 2 books, and a membership platform with tens of thousands of subscribers. All of it was built while quietly managing what was growing inside his skull. But here is what almost nobody following Tyler's story knew. He had not arrived at that courthouse in perfect health, which suddenly cracked. His body had been sending warnings for over a decade, and the first one arrived before he had ever done a single reading on television. The one blind spot a medium could never read. Teresa Kulawin was not simply Tyler's mother. She drove him to every reading because he never learned to drive. She appeared in his shows. By his own account, she was the closest person in his life. So when Teresa took an at-home ancestry DNA test in 2019 out of casual curiosity, and the results came back pointing to relatives she had never heard of, the floor shifted beneath everything she thought she knew. Tyler did what he always did when someone he loved was in pain. He reached for the gift. And the gift said nothing. One unexpected match was all it took to uncover a family secret that had been hidden for decades. The discovery turned Teresa's life upside down. The woman who had raised Teresa was not her biological mother. Her name was Stella Guidry Nestle. As Teresa dug deeper, she uncovered court records that revealed a horrifying past. Stella had been sentenced to 2 concurrent life terms in a California prison after being convicted of torturing and murdering the owner of the Fowler Motel in Fresno and the owner's boyfriend. She served over 30 years before being granted parole in 2009. The murders took place in 1985, and Stella even involved her teenage son, forcing him to help conceal the bodies. Teresa has said that Stella would take her to a new church when she was young and use her to persuade strangers into giving money. As Teresa continued digging, she uncovered evidence suggesting she had been taken from her biological family in Louisiana as a baby or very young child, possibly through a fraudulent adoption or by being removed without her family's consent. She was then brought to California, where Stella raised her under a false identity. Teresa did discover her biological mother's name, Mary Baroni, and the two were able to connect with Mary's family in Louisiana. But Mary herself had passed away by the time the show aired. They never had the chance to meet. Tyler had spent years giving other people the thing his mother had just been denied: the chance to close something that could never fully be closed. Tyler sat with all of it. The man who had spent years illuminating other people's family histories could not touch his own. He tried. His gift, he said, simply would not come. For years, he'd helped strangers uncover details about their loved ones' lives and deaths. But when his own family history fell apart, he couldn't come through. The people closest to him were the ones he couldn't read. It's one of the great ironies of his life. The ability that made him famous seemed to fall silent when he needed it most. That admission also complicates one of the biggest criticisms Tyler has faced for years: that his readings relied on publicly available information and skilled cold reading rather than anything supernatural. Critics often point to Tyler's reading with Moby. Much of Moby's childhood, family history, and struggles with addiction had already been documented in his memoir and years of interviews, leading skeptics to argue that research could explain what appeared to be revelation. Then there is Alan Thicke, the Canadian actor best known as the warm, wisecracking father on the sitcom Growing Pains. The show ran on ABC from 1985 to 1992 and made Thicke one of the most recognizable faces on American television. He was 69 years old and still enormously active when Tyler filmed the reading with him in September 2016. Alan approached the reading with obvious skepticism, but Tyler skipped the small talk and went straight to something he said felt urgent. He told Alan he was picking up blood pressure and heart concerns, that a man who had died from a heart condition was urging Alan not to ignore similar signs. Alan was skeptical. He said apart from his sister's open-heart surgery, he wasn't aware of a significant family history of heart disease. 3 months later, he collapsed playing hockey with his son and died from a ruptured aorta. To skeptics, it wasn't proof of anything. Heart disease is one of the leading causes of death among older men, and warning someone to pay attention to their heart could be seen as common sense rather than prophecy. Supporters saw it differently. They argued Tyler's warning had been unusually specific, right down to the family history and the urgency behind it. They argue the emotional accuracy and specificity of Tyler's readings go beyond anything careful preparation could account for. Years later, neither side has settled the debate. A waiting list of 700,000 people does not prove a gift is real. But it proves something that might matter more: that millions of people are carrying a grief so heavy that logic alone has stopped being enough. But none of that answered the biggest irony in Tyler's own story. He warned Alan Thicke about his heart. He told Ricky Lake and her husband he was sensing a fire risk and potential loss of material possessions, phrased cautiously, but specific enough that when her Malibu home burned in the 2025 LA wildfires, Lake went to Instagram and said he had called it. Then the questions stopped being about other people's lives. The bill his body had been running up. While he was filming Hollywood Medium, shooting both Netflix series, and touring the country, his doctors were keeping watch over a mass near the center of his brain that wasn't going away. At the same time, he was also living with cysts on his lungs, separate from the brain and requiring their own treatment. His body was managing two serious health conditions, while his career demanded he sit across from grieving families, night after night, fully present for people at the hardest moments of their lives. The headaches were real. The hospital visits were real. So were the procedures and the recovery that followed. Tyler asked the same question in interview after interview, never arriving at an answer that satisfied him. If this ability was real, why did it seem to come at such a personal cost? He wondered whether years of readings, sometimes night after night, on long national tours, were placing a strain on his body that it simply couldn't handle. In early 2020, just before the pandemic shut everything down, Tyler's lung collapsed. When surgeons operated, they found his lungs had several air leaks from cysts, a separate condition from the brain, and one that had been building up to that point for years. He was hospitalized for 3 weeks, then spent the better part of a year recovering before returning to work. Tyler rarely complained. Instead, he seemed determined to find meaning in what his body was trying to tell him, even when the answers weren't clear. Tyler also admitted something that often gets overlooked. He didn't know how to stop. He told Netflix in 2022 that if he went without doing readings for more than 3 weeks, he would start going what he called stir-crazy. Psychic impressions would begin arriving uninvited, images while falling asleep, and visits from spirits in his dreams. The readings, he said, were not just his career. They were the mechanism by which he kept his internal experience manageable. Without the structure of a session, the impressions had nowhere to go. He said that whenever he tried to take a few weeks off, something felt wrong. He became restless, unsettled, physically wrong, in a way that had nothing to do with his emotions. He joked that stepping away from readings left him spiritually constipated, and the phrase was funny enough that people laughed and moved on without sitting with what it actually implied. It was a funny phrase, but it revealed just how deeply the work had become part of him. Walking away didn't make him feel rested. It made him feel physically out of balance. By early 2025, the cyst had grown to the point where draining it was no longer enough. Surgery was the only option. The day before the operation, Tyler married Clint in a quiet courthouse ceremony because neither of them could ignore the possibility that everything might change the next morning. The surgery was successful, but it wasn't the end. In the months that followed, Tyler underwent 2 more brain surgeries. Then came something his audience had never seen before: silence. The silence had a reason. Tyler revealed he was experiencing severe short-term memory loss, describing himself as feeling like a goldfish, able to hold only about 10 minutes of memory at a time. For a man whose entire career depended on sharp, precise communication, it was a cruel thing to lose. He said it was improving. But it explained why, for the first time in years, there was simply nothing to say. And for the first time in his public life, Tyler Henry went somewhere his audience could not follow. 3 surgeries and a very loud silence. After the first surgery, Tyler told fans the outlook was good and promised he'd be back soon. It felt like the worst was behind him. It wasn't. By October, symptoms had returned. Scans showed the swelling was back, and Tyler needed a second brain surgery, his second in just 6 months. He'd be on bed rest for a month, but he expected to recover. For everyone following his journey, it felt like the worst was finally behind him. It wasn't. Within weeks, the swelling had returned. Tyler's medical team decided a third surgery. His third in under 6 months was the only option. This time, it was Clint who broke the news to fans, confirming the operation had gone well and that Tyler was expected home within days. Tyler finally broke his silence in December. In a message to fans, he shared the news he'd been waiting years to give. Doctors had completely removed the cyst. The outlook was excellent, but recovery had been harder than he expected, forcing him to postpone every live event and public appearance through February 2026. One line stood out. Tyler said the cyst had been a weight on him for a long time, and that it was incredible to finally be free of it. But it also revealed something many hadn't realized. This wasn't a health battle that had begun in 2025. Tyler had been carrying it for a long time, quietly managing it while building a career, filming television shows, touring the country, and helping thousands of strangers through some of the hardest moments of their lives. Everything around Tyler suddenly slowed down. The waiting list stopped growing. Tour dates disappeared from the calendar. His membership platform carried on, but without him at the center of it. For the first time in years, the people who had turned to Tyler for comfort were left with the same uncertainty they had always trusted him to help them through. They didn't know when he would be back. They didn't know how he was doing. All they could do was wait. For years, Tyler had helped other people sit with unanswered questions. Now, his own absence had become one, and for the first time, there was no reading that could close it. The price nobody saw on the invoice. In 2022, Tyler sat with a journalist and said something almost in passing. He said the answers he gave to other people were often the ones he needed most himself. At the time, he was talking about his mother's past. Looking back, it's hard not to hear those words differently. They seem to describe his own journey just as much. Tyler Henry's career wasn't really built on fame, television shows, or a massive waiting list. It was built on something much more personal: hope. People came to him because they wanted to believe the people they loved weren't truly gone. That grief wasn't the end of the relationship. That somehow, through Tyler, they might hear one last message or receive the kind of detail that only they and their loved one could have shared. Whatever was happening in those rooms, people left them differently than they arrived. Something that had been locked opened. Whether the key was psychic or psychological, the door opened anyway. For many of them, that experience mattered just as much as the question of how it happened. For people who were always skeptical, Tyler's health struggles don't change much. They see them as proof that, whatever his abilities, he was still a human being with real medical problems. Fame, belief, and a waiting list can't change that. For those who believed in Tyler's gift, the story feels very different. His long silence and repeated surgeries don't answer the question of whether his abilities were real. If anything, they raise another one. What was the personal cost of doing this work for so many years? It's a question Tyler asked himself long before the surgeries. If this was a gift, why did it seem to come at the expense of his health? He never claimed to have the answer. And years later, neither does anyone else. What 2025 really revealed was the side of Tyler's life most people never saw. Behind the television shows and sold-out tours was someone carrying his own struggles. His family history had been quietly dismantled by a DNA test. His body had been breaking down in ways his audience never saw. And through all of it, he kept showing up, sitting across from strangers in the worst moments of their lives, offering them the one thing he had never quite been able to offer himself. Tyler wasn't separate from the pain he witnessed every day. He was living with his own. Now, the person so many people turn to for comfort has stepped away from the spotlight. 3 brain surgeries, months of recovery. A tour has been postponed, and hundreds of thousands of people are still waiting, hoping he'll be well enough to return. The question was never really about Tyler Henry. It was always the one people brought to him in the first place. When we lose someone we love, is that really the end? For more than a decade, Tyler gave millions of people hope that the answer might be yes. Now, his audience finds itself somewhere all too familiar, waiting, hoping, and looking for a sign that he'll be back. If Tyler Henry's own struggles were far greater than anyone realized, does that make his message more believable or less? And after everything you've seen, what do you think was really happening? Was Tyler Henry experiencing something beyond explanation? Or was he searching for the same hope everyone else was looking for? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.